Hi there, it's Bonnie with So Inspired by Bonnie with another Tuesday's tip. And I have a special favor to ask everybody. If you would please like and share the video so that Facebook will release it out to everybody, because the more the merrier. The more interaction we can get going on, the funner it is for everybody. So if you would please like and share the video when you show up, that would be a big help, and I really appreciate you doing that. Excuse me, I had an itch on my nose. I'm going to go ahead and go over and refresh the page just to make sure that everything's up and working. And what we're going to talk about today is Gone Noodles. I titled it Gone Noodles because there's a lot of uses for pool noodles in the sewing room. Who knew, right? So I started doing a little bit of looking around and found out that we can use pool noodles in the sewing room. I thought that was kind of fun. So I have a lot of fun things to share with you, and can't wait to get started. Hi, Carol. Great to see you. I'm sure others are showing up. I have a delay here. So anyway, let's get going. Also, just to remind you, be sure to go over to our website at www.sew, S-E-W is how it's spelled, sewinspiredbybonnie.com, and sign up for our newsletter where we have tips and inspiration and sales information, and we announce our Tuesday's tips, times, and dates there, as well as new releases and our blog post, just all sorts of stuff. So you'll want to go over there and sign up for our newsletter for sure. So again, we're going to be talking about pool noodles and how we can use them in the sewing room. Now that really seems like a strange thing to use, but it works. So I can't wait to share. I see Sandy and Carol are here. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I have a few uses for pool noodles that I ran into. I won't be demonstrating all of them, but just to give you some ideas where you could use them. You could use them as a pin cushion. I never thought of using a pool noodle as a pin cushion, but okay. And what I did was I just took a ordinary pool noodle and just serrated knife, yeah, I guess that's how you say it, serrated knife, and I cut a little section off. I didn't measure or get fancy. I just thought, oh, that looks about right. And then I cut it in half again, and presto changeo, I had a little pin cushion that worked really, really well. Now, I don't know, I might have shared this tip with you on an earlier video, but I've stolen a couple of my husband's, he's a pilot, and I stole a couple of his earplugs because when I have needles and you poke them in, and you know how they poke your finger? Well, I put the earplugs on the end of the needles years ago, and now I see them selling these in the sewing, I've seen them selling them in some sewing store. I can't remember where I saw them. For considerably more. You can get these at any, sporting goods store, I'm sure. A lot of people just use them as earplugs. So anyway, I use those to make the end of a needle softer so that when I push it in, number one, I can identify that as a needle, a sewing needle with an eye on the end. Number two, I don't accidentally poke it and poke my finger on the end. But I saw that while I was throwing this little segment together today, and I thought, well, why couldn't I just cut up a little scrap of the pool noodle and do the same thing? And so I used my knife, cut a little deal off, poked it right in, and it worked. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. So I discovered that little use for a pool noodle just before going live. So I stuck it in here, and that again identifies which needles or pins are needles as opposed to just a straight pin. So I had some fun with that. Another use for them is you can use them to pin baste a quilt. Just a little short description, and if anybody's interested, we can do a whole Tuesday's tip on that. But they used 3 pool noodles, and then they rolled up the 3 segments, and then they just unroll a segment at a time and pin just like a couple of feet at a time. But they used them for pin basting a quilt. Again, I can show you that on another Tuesday's tip if everybody's interested. But that's kind of a whole Tuesday's tip all in itself. Then I also saw where they use it to store quilts. Now, if you use a pool noodle to store your quilt, I would go with the bigger size. They came in 2 sizes that I found. I've also seen online where there's some that are shaped like a flower that are super cute, but I didn't, in my search, find them yet. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I just haven't found them yet. They came in 2 sizes. The first store I went to was Target, and this size was $2.99, and the smaller size was $1.99. I went to, or somewhere in there, it's like $1 and $2. I went to Walmart. The big size was only $1, and the little size was 50 cents. So just a little heads up, Walmart is at least half price on the pool noodles. Not that you'll break the bank with either one, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Same exact pool noodles. They come in all sorts of colors. They came in like a blue, the green, pink, purple. You can find them in all kinds of colors, which I thought was fun too. You can also, as I was saying, you can store your bindings on them. And if you store the bindings on them, another tip I mentioned probably several years ago was using a toilet paper insert, just the little tube there. And you can roll it around and put it on, pin onto that. But with the pool noodle, you just cut off a section, and I like it a little bit better. I used the small size for this, for the bindings. What I like is that I can pin straight into it, whereas I couldn't pin straight into the toilet paper roll. So I like the pool noodle better for rolling up the bindings. I thought that was kind of slick that I could just pin straight into it and not worry about getting poked with the pins later on. Another reason I kind of like the pool noodle option better than the toilet paper roll is I noticed my toilet paper roll is getting squished flat. So this will stay nice and round. It's not going to get squished flat, whereas the toilet paper roll tube might do that, might flatten out over time. So you can store your bindings on it. You can store quilts on a pool noodle. Yes, I would recommend using the bigger size to store a quilt, and they recommend rolling the quilt with the outside facing out, not with the wrong side facing out. They say that that's better on the fibers, and you'll get less wrinkles or creases in your quilt. So roll that with the quilt on the outside of your pool noodle. If the pool noodle is a little bit floppy from the weight of the quilt, they recommend putting some dowel rods in the center, which is pretty easy to get your hands on a dowel rod. So that's a really handy way to transport quilts if you need to do that. Quilt blocks. Now, ordinarily I like to store my quilt blocks flat in, say, a scrapbook container, because they're 12 by 12, and that'll do most quilt blocks. But I think if you had a bigger quilt block, say 15 by 15, or just an odd shaped block that would not fit in a 12 by 12 little scrapbook box, then I would definitely use the pool noodle. You could cut it to whatever length you need. That would be handy for your quilt block. Again, I would roll it with the right side out. Then, let's see, pin cushion, quilt basting, store the bindings, store the quilts, quilt blocks. But what I really wanted to show you is several years ago, I gave you a tip on serger sponges and how it was a Tuesday's tip regarding needle breaks and things like that with the embroidery machine. And I use serger sponges on the base of my thread stands, on my machine, and on the big thread stand. I love the serger sponges. Of course, I use it on my serger too. But what it does is it gives your thread a base to sit on, so that if thread happens to puddle down around the base, it doesn't get caught underneath and then not feed on your machine, and then it bends the needle and thus you break a needle. So the serger sponge prevents needle breaks because it prevents the thread from puddling underneath the spool and getting caught. So if you look at the serger sponge, it's nothing special. It's just, nice and round, and it has a little hole. So what I did was I took my trusty knife and I cut my pool noodle about the same width. I cut it about a 1/2 inch, and these are super simple to cut. I just, let me move my computer aside so you can kind of see how easy this is to cut. I was surprised. I thought it might be a little more difficult than it is. And what I did was I took a little marker and I took my little ruler, and I first measured about 1 inch because I thought, oh, I don't know if I could cut, a little tiny 1/2 inch, but it's not a problem. I just, and you can even eyeball it, but I just kind of measured off and kind of marked where a 1/2 inch or so was, and then you just take your knife and just like that, and I'm sitting instead of standing, so I can't really see, and this one's not going to be very straight. You would cut straighter because you'd be standing and could see everything, but just that easy, you can cut right through it. It's really a piece of cake. And so then when you put this on your thread stand, now this does have a bigger hole in it, and I haven't quite figured out yet how to fill up the hole for specific thread, but for this, the most common embroidery thread, you can just pop that right on there, and it's going to protect it. Because if I did not have a sponge on here, or the pool noodle rather, on here, I don't know if you could see this, but it's kind of slopping around the bottom, and I could see where it could easily get thread hung up underneath, get caught, and then bend that needle because it wouldn't fade and break a needle. Which brings me to another tip. If for any reason you do break a needle on your embroidery machine or your sewing machine, please stop the machine. Don't automatically just pull out the thread. Just stop everything, which is normal. I mean, that's a normal reaction. But stop and look at the thread. Look and see if it got hung up somewhere, and that will give you an indication of what you need to correct so it won't break again. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone out there on the internet writing in distress about, I'm breaking needle after needle after needle, and I don't know what's wrong with my machine. And I just wish, and I've seen it happen in classes, and 9 times out of 10, the thread is getting hung up on the thread path somehow, somewhere, and it's getting caught, and if you get that correction fixed, you won't be breaking needles. So just as a little side tip, always stop and look at the thread path if you break a needle. So if you cannot find the serger sponges anywhere where you're located, and I had a lot of people write in and say they couldn't find the serger sponges, pool noodles will work great as a substitute. It works really well on, the big cones. I recommend using the large pool noodle, the $1 pool noodle. For the serger sponges, you could get a whole bunch of little serger sponge replacements with one pool noodle, and it'll work for the big cones, it'll work for your standard cones, but the pool noodle or the serger sponge itself works best for this kind of thread, where you want it to go right in that small hole and not puddle around. These threads are notorious for puddling around and getting caught and breaking. So don't use a spool cap if you put it on horizontal. If you happen to put it this way, you definitely want a spool sponge. Spool sponge? Now I'm getting the two words combined. You definitely want a serger sponge. The pool noodles, they're just too big. The hole is too big, and I haven't yet quite figured out what we could put inside there to support it and just have, a size hole at the end, the same size as the tube of thread. So put your thinking caps on, and if you come up with an idea we can, you know, put in there to secure that and have it nestle in there really nice so the thread does not get hung up and it can't pool around the end and hang up. So that, you know, I really wanted to share because we had a lot of people writing in saying they could not find the serger sponges anywhere. The pool noodles are a great substitute if you cannot find a serger sponge. So let's go over here and see if we have any questions. That's really all I have as far as different uses that we can do with a pool noodle. But let's come over here and see if anybody else, and I've lost my little, oh, here it is, my little mat. We'll see if we have any questions, and we'll see if anybody has a favorite way that they use a pool noodle. So let's go ahead and check out the questions first. Susan said, is the hole smaller in the smaller noodle? You could have two sizes. You know, the hole in this, that's a really good question. But no, the hole is the same size whether it's the small pool noodle or the bigger pool noodle. And I thought of cotton, but cotton, I didn't like how that worked either. So we just, I don't know if, and I'll have to experiment with it. I might be able to use a scrap of the pool noodle to fit inside the hole, trace around, say, the end of the thread cone here. If I trace that onto the edge of a pool noodle, I might be able to fit it, you know, and trace the hole of this. I might be able to put a noodle inside a noodle. That might work. So I'll have to see if that works when we get off. You know, it's hard telling what's going to work and what's not. Louise is just laughing hysterically. Okay. Marilyn Nicatra, she said, just cut one thin piece of the noodle and put it in the center. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, is maybe cut a thin piece, put it in the center, but you still need a hole that's the same size as the smaller tube here to set inside there. But it might work where you could put one inside the other and have it work just like a serger sponge. But oh my goodness, you see how many serger sponges you could get out of one pool noodle? I mean, how many replacements anyway? Gosh. Judy says silly putty. That might work, except would the thread get stuck on the silly putty? I don't know. I think the silly putty, it might it might get stuck. And then we break a needle. We don't want to do that. So we need something that would just fit inside, that just has a little hole the same size as the end of the thread cone. Okay, let's see if I can see any more questions. This my computer is kind of hung up, so I'm going to refresh the page here and see if it will let me see some more questions here. Okay, it just, oh, there we go. Computers. Polymer clay. Shauna just said polymer clay. I haven't messed with polymer clay, but that's a possibility. I mean, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, isn't polymer clay kind of soft and then it dries hard, but you could shape it to the shape you want and then just stick it inside there. And I think that might work. I'll have to try that. Thanks, Shauna. That's a great idea. Sherry says she's loving it. I mean, don't you just love the idea of being able to take something and repurpose it for something else, especially if it's going to save you a lot of money? I mean, the last time I checked, I think those serger sponges were a package of 2 or 3 for $6.95. But I mean, $6.95, that's what comes to mind. I know they were not, you know, nearly as inexpensive as a pool noodle. I mean, you could get a whole slew of them. You know, your whole friends could go in and pitch a penny a piece, and you'd have a whole bunch of pool noodle. I mean, serger sponge replacements. So I just love it when I can find something that will work equally well on the cheap to replace something that just because it says sewing by it, all of a sudden it's way more expensive. I think it says Maddie. My mature eyes. Maddie? Is that how you say your name? I'm not sure. She said great minds. Yeah, great minds run in the same track and little ones in the same ditch, as the saying goes. Shauna said yes. So she does say that the polymer clay is soft, kind of like the putty, and then will dry hard. So that's a great idea. We'll have to try that, Shauna. Thanks for the tip. Okay, I think that's all. Maddie, mate, I can't say your name. I wish there was a volume control where we could actually talk back and forth. She goes, it's good enough. I was close enough. I'm going to have someone that knows how to say your name share that with me. I'm the world's worst at names. I slaughter them. Anyway, I'm getting onto the farm to market road. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion on the pool noodles. I don't see any more questions coming in, but please, if you have a question, pop it in, because I will be checking throughout the day to answer any questions that I did not get answered on our live feed. I see 21 comments, but it's only showing me 4. And when I try to pop over here to see the other 21, it's not. It's just hiding them from me. It keeps rolling them out of view faster than I can read them. So anyway, I will answer the questions. Do not fear about that. But I just had to share this tip. I thought it was a lot of fun. And as a side note, the extra pool noodles that I won't be using in the sewing room, I'm going to cut up a few of the larger size and go put them in some boots that are hanging over in my closet. So I saw a tip where they were putting them in boots, to keep your boots upright so they don't fall over and get creases. I thought that was kind of cool. Not sewing related, but hey, we all have feet and we all wear shoes, right? So if you have some boots that might need a little stiffening, pool noodles are the ticket. Oh, okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. I wanted to let you know that if you do share a Tuesday's tip idea with me, I should say, if you just share one of your favorite tips with me, and I use it on the live feed as one of our Tuesday's tips, I will send you free 6x10 sheets of our super sparkly. They have the clear carriers and the glare doesn't really show it. The super sparkly glitter flex as a thank you for sharing your favorite tips with me. So you'll want to be sure to do that. You can send the tips to my email address at sewinspiredbybonnie@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to get them there. Or again, I have a few different emails. I'll get it. Okay, I'm just looking at my cheat sheet to make sure I don't forget to say anything. I think I got through everything. Oh, there's another question coming in. Oh, okay, they're all saying hi and stuff. Okay, so anyway, I wanted to thank everybody for stopping by and sharing a part of your busy day with me for the Tuesday's tips. It's always fun to touch base with you and get a little bit more personal with everybody instead of just emailing back and forth. It's fun to kind of chit chat and share a little bit of our day together. So again, if you have any of your favorite ways to use a pool noodle in the sewing room, please share it with us in the comments section so that we can all go a little noodles with pool noodles in our sewing room. Until next Tuesday. Bye-bye.